everybody. Today it's about 90 degrees here in Pennsylvania and I really wanted to make a video. So I'm gonna make a video today about my top 10 favorite national park hikes. So some of these are gonna be sentimental in nature for me, and they're ones that I've picked just because I have just like wonderful memories of doing this with my family. Some are gonna be hikes that maybe you're gonna agree with, that are some of the best hikes that can be found in the national parks. And I hope at the end of the video, I hope that you'll let me know what your favorite national park hike is. If you have a favorite hike, if you have a top 5, if you want to give me your top 10 list, I'd love to hear it. So I'll go through why I chose each one and what I thought was the best about it, and then I want to hear from you. Okay, so my very first hike, these are my top 10, but they're not in any specific order. So the first one I want to talk about is Sky Pond, and this is in Rocky Mountain National Park. I was here with my family. We hiked this with some extended family as well, an aunt and uncle, and their adult children. So it was really fun to hike to Sky Pond in a big group. And this is a hard hike, it really was. So Sky Pond is not an easy hike. You're looking at about 9 miles round trip. I live in Pennsylvania, so going out to Colorado, just that altitude change, you want to make sure that you acclimate yourself for a couple days before you attempt to do a hike like this. The air is thin, it's harder to breathe, it is steep. You go past a beautiful alpine lake, you actually climb up a waterfall, which is super memorable. I've never had a hike like this before. And it's not like, oh, you just skirt the edge of a waterfall. You're actually hand over hand climbing an actual waterfall. So that was really, really unexpected. The wildlife is amazing. We saw a pine marten on this trail, which we'd never seen before. We saw a pika. So just some different types of wildlife that we've just never seen before. So that made it so amazing. We started out on a beautiful day, and as we kept going, when we got closer to, I think it's called the Lake of Glass. It's kind of like where a lot of people get to and think they're at Sky Pond, and they're not. It's like the lake right before Sky Pond. When we got up there, there was actually like a rock slide off in the distance, and we could hear that. Then when we finally made it to Sky Pond, it started to lightly snow on us. We had to cross a snow field. So it was just a really, really cool experience. Absolutely beautiful. So now we're gonna jump over to Glacier National Park. And another hike that is super memorable for me is our hike to Grinnell Glacier. So our kids were a little bit on the younger side when we did this, and we decided that we would take a guided ranger hike to the glacier, and we used 2 of the park's boat system to cut off some mileage. So if you've never been on the Glacier Park boats, they're historic wooden boats. They're really cool. So the boat took you across one lake. You went on a short, maybe quarter of a mile path over the dirt to get to another lake, and then that boat took us. And then even with that, I believe it is about 8 or 9 miles. And what was really great is hiking this with the park ranger. She set the pace, and she was teaching us all these things along the hike. I don't necessarily love a group hike. It's not my favorite thing. I'm more of a person that likes peace and quiet and things like this. But in this case, it was so nice to have the ranger teach us things, help us with pacing, have us take breaks, and you knew that you're gonna make it in time back to reach the boat. And also too, for us, you know, sometimes kids complain and things like that on a hike. Having the ranger there leading us, we didn't have any complaints from our kids, which was really nice. But this is an amazing hike, and same thing, you're gonna look down on these glacial lakes, and they're just the brightest turquoise blue. And then you also have a section of the hike that's going to skirt a waterfall as you go up. So you're gonna get sprayed a little bit. That was really cool. We saw a moose. And then when you get to the glacier, there's obviously like ice and snow, and there were these rocks on the ground, and they were algae mats, like from like fossils of algae mats, and they were really, really cool looking. Hike to Grinnell Glacier was one of those hikes where the whole way the scenery was beautiful. There was so much to look at. You're hiking through the bear grass in the summer, which is super tall and beautiful. And I would highly recommend this hike if you ever find yourself at Glacier National Park. It's a great one. The next hike I'm going to talk about is in Yosemite National Park. So my husband and I, when we first got married, we came to Yosemite for a honeymoon. And then I think it was 11 years later, we decided that we would take our kids back with us And when we're there, we would do some pretty serious hiking. So we hiked the Panorama Trail, and that is about, the Panorama Trail is about 8.5 miles. So this is a really, really intense hike. There's a lot of climbing, a lot of elevation changes, but you're gonna be able to see several waterfalls, Nevada Falls, Vernal Falls, and then you're gonna come back down on the Mist Trail. So just an absolutely beautiful hike. It was challenging because of the length and because of how long it took us. And then, but just the scenery is just unbelievable. I look at some of the pictures and I'm just like, I just can't imagine that we were there and that we were able to do it as a family. And yeah, it was just a really, really special hike to know that that was a place where we spent our honeymoon, and then to go back with the kids and to accomplish this hike. So it always holds a lot of special memories for me. And then I also laugh thinking we were so exhausted after the hike, and we're waiting in line for the shuttle bus, and every bus that pulls up is just so crowded. And finally we get on the bus, we have to jam in and stand in the front. And our kids were saying their feet hurt. They took their shoes off in the shuttle bus. We were just like, whatever at that point. So I have to mention Maine and Acadia. And I was kind of torn between the Beehive, because that was one of like the kind of hard hikes that our kids did, and the Precipice, but I have to go with the Precipice as my favorite. So if you've ever been to Acadia, it can be a little bit difficult if you visit in the summer months to hike the Precipice because it often closes down for nesting falcons. I had been to Acadia 3 different times, and finally the one year that we went towards the very end of August, maybe it was even early September, right after Labor Day, they had reopened the trail because the nesting falcons, I guess, had fledged or whatever, and we were able to hike the Precipice. So my son and my husband and I hiked this trail. And I remember just from the very beginning, we go to start, and I think it was my husband's like, there's no way we can do this. And I remembered that I had watched a YouTube video, and I knew which handhold to use and like how to get up to first start the trail. But that was kind of our sign that the trail was going to be crazy. So this trail goes up Champlain Mountain. I think there's 1,000 feet. There's 1,000 feet in elevation gain. But what makes this trail so unique is the iron rungs and ladder system. You're basically climbing a vertical ladder up the side of a cliff. So, you know, my son at that point was a little bit older, but I believe my husband went in front, son went in the middle, I went in the bottom to kind of just like spot him and say like, you're all right, keep going. And he really did great. He wanted to do this. But the views when you get up there are just amazing. And there's something really fun about doing a hike with kind of like these non-technical climbs, the ladder systems and the rungs and the rock. And the whole time you're hiking, you're just like, who came up with this? Who put these ladders here? Because it's really, really epic. And once you're done the ladder portion and you're just looking out over the water, it is absolutely gorgeous. I would say if you have a fear of heights, you don't want to hike the Precipice in Acadia. This is not a trail that you would bring young children on if they were not experienced hikers. So just keep that in mind. And also, I know this from hiking the Beehive, which is also another ladder system trail. If it is wet, if it's damp in the morning, be extremely careful because the rungs get slippery and you can slip with your boots. That didn't happen to us on the Precipice, but it can definitely happen if it's slippery or slick conditions in the morning. Just make sure you always have kind of like a handheld when you're changing your foot position and things like that. And the other thing, I can't say this enough about Acadia, it's a beautiful park. It gets very crowded. If you want to hike these trails, you need to start early to give yourself the best, most pleasant experience where you're not waiting for people. We started early. We had no problem. That's just the key. And, you know, when I say early, I really mean early. I mean, maybe getting up when it's dark, but for us, that's our preferred method. It may not be for you, but for us, we would rather get up early, hike the trail in relative peace, and then go back later and take a nap. All right, so this is not a US national park, but it is in Waterton Lakes, which is the sister park that connects to Glacier. So this next hike takes place there, and it's called Crypt Lake. So to get to Crypt Lake, you have to take a boat. It's about a 15-minute boat ride to get to the trailhead where it starts. This was the coolest hike we've ever done. You see a little bit of everything on it. At one point, you're kind of like climbing up a cliff face. There's cables and things. You actually climb through a cave. There's ladders. And then we saw snow along the trail. There's a beautiful, tall, kind of like thin ribbon waterfall out in the distance. And then you finally get to Crypt Lake, glacial lake that's on the border of United States and Canada. And it is just beautiful, the most pristine lake you've ever seen. You hike along, there's 4 different waterfalls that you can see along your path. And then I believe the tunnel was something like 60 feet, and it is actually really dark in there. I use my cell phone camera to light it up as you go through, but my kids just absolutely love this one. We felt really adventurous hiking it with our kids at the time, but then of course we looked ahead and there were some people with like a baby and a backpack carrier, and we're like, oh, okay, we're not that adventurous compared to these people. These people are really adventurous. But yeah, this was a really, really great day hike. And we got some awesome t-shirts that show like I survived the Crypt Lake hike, and it has the ladder and the cave and the boat and then the lake on it. So a really fun t-shirt, definitely worth the souvenir if you hike all those miles to get to Crypt Lake. Okay, so my next hike takes place in Yellowstone National Park. And a lot of people think of, the geysers and things like that at Yellowstone, and that's all awesome. But one of our most memorable hikes was to Mount Washburn. So we had read in the guidebook that if you do this hike, you can often see like bighorn sheep and mountain goats. And that was something that we thought would be really, really cool. When we were there, it was wildflower season. So all these wildflowers were blooming on the whole way up the mountain. And then when you do get to the summit, we get up there with the kids, and a whole herd of, I don't know if they were goats or if they were bighorn sheep, just crosses our path. So we have these amazing pictures. I'll show them to you of just these goats everywhere. And then you get up, there's a historic fire tower, and the views from that are amazing up there. And it's staffed by someone kind of looking out to watch for the wildfires. So that was really neat to see. You do have to be careful because of the elevation of thunderstorms. You want to start early in the day to give yourself the best chance of getting up there and getting back safely. And I know that this trail was closed for a number of years due to wildfire damage, and I believe it's reopened again. But this was just one of those trails where I can say to the kids, hey, remember this one? They'll go, oh, the goats. So the next hike I want to talk about is the Alpine Lakes Loop that we just did in Great Basin National Park. And this one sticks in my mind so much because overall the park, the trails, it was the most pristine, the most quiet, the most peaceful national park I have ever been to. Not a piece of trash. We barely saw anyone else on the trails. Like, it was just an unbelievable wilderness experience. And this Alpine Lakes Loop is so cool because it really isn't that strenuous. And you pass 2 of these lakes, and they're seasonal lakes, so you're not going to find like fish or things in them. But it is just absolutely beautiful scenery. And then at the end of the Alpine Lakes Loop, we added on to go up and see the bristlecone pine trees. And these are some of the oldest living trees. If you want to see more information about that, I have a YouTube video about it. And I know you kind of think like, oh, how cool are trees? These trees are so unique looking and so twisty and thousands of years old. It's just amazing. So this hike just stands out in my mind also too because of all the wildlife we saw. Deer crossed our path. We saw a grouse. We saw several packs of wild turkeys. So it was just really, really beautiful at the Great Basin National Park. And it was just one of those experiences where you just feel like you're on another planet. It was so quiet. It was so different from some of our other national park experiences. So you know I couldn't have this video and not talk about the Old Rag hike. So my husband and I just did this hike for my 43rd birthday, and it was absolutely amazing. So you do need a permit to hike Old Rag, and this is a 9-mile loop. You're going to have like pretty much the craziest rock scrambles and things like that in the first few, I'd say, miles of the trail. First, it starts out pretty normal, your average forest climb. Then you get to these rock scramble sections, and they are like no rock scramble section that I've ever done before. Like, you're shimmying, you're crawling like Spider-Man. Like, it was really, really intense. And they go on and on and on. And then you reach the summit. The views are amazing. And then as you make your way down, you're going down a fire trail. And what's really difficult about this hike is you've just exerted yourself on the rock scramble portions. and then you still have 5 miles to go on a fire road, which is easy hiking, but 5 miles is a long distance. And it's so funny, so many times you do a hike and you reach the summit and you feel like that sense of accomplishment, and you do feel that here, but then you also have like, oh my gosh, we have so much more hiking to do. But this was the type of hike where you really just felt proud of yourself that you were able to accomplish this. It was like no other hike I've ever done. The views were amazing, so I would definitely recommend the Old Rag hike, and this one is so memorable for me. Okay, so I can't keep Zion off my list here. So one of the trails I also have to mention is Angel's Landing in Zion. So this trail is just crazy. There's a section called Walter's Wiggles, and it's just these super steep switchbacks, and you are just climbing and climbing and climbing. And you might think, oh, well, switchbacks, it makes it easier, but I think there might be like a series of 10 switchbacks, and it gets exhausting. So if you're not familiar with Angel's Landing, when we hiked it years ago, you didn't need a permit. Now you need a permit to hike it. And this one was pretty crowded when we were there, and you can definitely see why the permit system is needed. I remember we made it to Scouts Lookout, and my husband really had to use the restroom, and they had a porta potty up there, and it had a sign on it for emergency use only, and we were just like, oh my gosh. So it gets so bad that they can't even like maintain the porta potty system with crowds and things like that. But this was one of those hikes where even if you don't go all the way up the chains to the very top, it is still worth it. So we hiked this when our children were fairly young. So the plan was that my husband would go up and climb the chains and go all the way up to Angel's Landing, and I sat with the kids at Scouts Lookout. And I do have to say, if you make it to Scouts Lookout, which is the point before the chains, the views are incredible there. They're amazing. And for me, I just didn't want to put my kids in that environment because there were so many people there. I didn't want them to feel rushed. And I think that at that time that would have been a little bit too much for them. So it took my husband a good while to navigate the chain system because of the crowds and things at that portion of the trail. And when he came back, he was like, I'll wait with the kids. Do you want to go? And I just decided that I was content with the views at Scouts Lookout. Okay, so my 10th most memorable hike takes place in Hawaii, and it's on Maui. We drive the road to Hana to get to Haleakala National Park. And when we got there, the trail that I'm going to talk about is the Pipiwai Trail. So if you've never driven the road to Hana before, it is 620 curves on the road. I wasn't sure I wanted to do this because it was going to take up the whole day, but in hindsight, I'm really glad we did it. There are so many amazing little stops along the road. We got incredible like local Hawaiian fruit. We tried some fruit we've never had before. We swam in a waterfall along the way. We got the most amazing banana bread. So if you're going to do this, you're going to want to go slow, respect the locals, respect the speed limit. And this is going to be a whole day. You're going to do the drive, you're going to get to the national park, and then if you're like us, you might do the Pipiwai Trail. So the highlight of this trail is a waterfall, and it is one of those just giant, thin, ribbon type waterfalls off a mountain, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Just the lush tropical foliage. And then another really cool thing is you go through a bamboo forest, and that was really unique as well. So this was a great trail. You see kind of like some banyan trees and just some unique local Hawaiian plants and different things that you just don't see in Pennsylvania. So this trail really, really stands out to me as, okay, so that is my 10 favorite national park hiking trails. Be sure to let me know, do you agree with some of the trails I picked? Have you hiked any of the trails I picked? What would be one of your favorite hiking trails in a national park? Give me your top 10 list if you want. Thanks for watching, guys. Keep cool. I'm hoping this 90-degree weather here ends soon.